We talk a lot about the ego.
We do.
And the more I become aware and learn and change and evolve, the ego's making more and more sense. And how it plays a significant role in our lives and how we show up in the world. But I almost want to go back to the basics of the ego and to minimize it by labeling it as basic doesn't do it justice, because it is extremely complex and there are so many layers to it. But I'd like to get into simplifying it and at least giving everybody a better understanding of what we mean by ego when we talk about it all the time, because this is going to keep coming up, as it is a huge part of us and a huge part of our evolution and a huge part of integrating the ego aspects. Because I also know that within this spiritual journey and wellness journey, there's a lot of talk about ego death, killing the ego death, ego death. And I don't believe that. I don't think you can just kill the ego. It's part of us. It needs to be integrated, I believe. There's a lot of nuances with it, but yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the ego is almost like inextricably tied to the body. It's like while we're in a body, there's going to be the ego, because I think the best way like I can define the ego is it's sort of like it's the character that we're playing in this game of Earth, in this like Earth school. It's our avatar, and it's what we're using to essentially like filter our experience.
Yes. And the ego is not the enemy.
No, not at all.
Because there is who wrote the book, The Ego is the Enemy? I haven't read it.
Ryan Holiday. And there's a lot, it's a great book. Like there's a lot of great stuff in there, and there's a lot of nuance to the conversation.
Yeah. And it's all a conversation. I think it's interesting, you know. The ego is everything, to be honest. So it can be your enemy if you're unaware and if you're allowing it to dictate your life.
Which is the point. It's been a while since I read that. But yeah, I think that the ego and most of the sort of issues that arise from the ego kind of arise from being stuck in the ego or not necessarily realizing that the ego isn't the whole picture.
Yeah.
It's just a part of it.
The ego is such a fabulous teacher when we become aware of it. It's been something that has magically transformed my life, because I'm able to, how do I put it? I'm able to like understand that I'm not the ego. Exactly like you said, it's the way that I'm showing up in the world. It's almost like I call it like the ego filter.
Yeah.
Like I'm filtering this situation, anything that goes on through the lens of the ego. And the ego isn't me. It's not my true self. It's how I show up in the world based on conditions and programs, fears and patterns and all of societal norms and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. It's not necessarily bad. It's just beginning to identify how you show up in the world and why you are the way that you are is typically starts at such a young age. We don't realize it.
Yeah.
But then we go through life not realizing it, and we wake up one day miserable with who we are, who we've become, everybody around us. And it's like, how the did I get here? It's like, oh, but if you know, you know. And I feel like we're good. So that's kind of like I want to start at the beginning now.
Okay. Yeah. So,
well, I think the best way, and what we're talking about here is like what we've learned, listening to other people and like our truth of what we feel the ego is and how it's present in our lives, and it is just, you know, interesting to like I feel like Alan Watts is like the perfect person to he has been someone who really I resonate with when he talks about the ego and what it means and how it is our illusion of self.
Yeah, it's no secret. I love Alan Watts. But and also like really this ties into what you were just saying, that I feel like on this journey, like we like find things and like seeds are planted, but then time goes by and it doesn't necessarily bloom yet. And so much of like Alan Watts was such like a gateway drug for me, where it's like I listened and it was like he's such a captivating speaker. He said things that were like blew my mind, but I couldn't quite get it.
Same.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So
like when you had me listen to those lectures on Spotify, and I was like, this is really interesting. I don't fully grasp it, but now I get it. I'm like, yes. And that was like 5-6 years ago.
Right.
That's what I mean. The more I grow, the more I learn, the more I raise my consciousness. Like, okay, everything, all the pieces are fitting together.
Yeah.
I get it. It's clicking.
And it's literally like it plants a seed. It's like just like you plant a seed and then you don't have like a tree the next day. The seed is there in the ground until the conditions are right. And then it's able to sprout. And I feel like I had all these ideas and concepts in my mind. And then it wasn't until they started to like align more with my experience that they started to really click. And it's like, oh, okay, like I kind of feel it and I get what's going on, and I understand it. And then I can go back and like listen to lectures or read books from Alan Watts or other people. Like I talk to David Hawkins all the time, and everybody. Yeah. Those are two big ones. Come back to the lectures and it's like, oh, okay. I understand why I was captivated by this before, and now I really get what it means. So I think it would be a good idea, like dive into some of those kind of teachings and maybe explain it a little bit and try to make some sense of what the ego is and why it matters. Especially like if we're saying like you're never going to get rid of the ego. So it's almost a matter of the better you can understand it and get what it is and realize that it's not who you are. It's just a role you're playing, and that we are so much more than the ego. So I did write down some quotes and just sort of some ideas from both Alan Watts and David Hawkins that I think will be pretty useful for making sense of the ego.
Okay.
And we'll kind of start there with a lot here. Alan Watts defines, or I guess describes, the ego as an illusion married to a futility, which is awesome. That's so much of like him, where it's like I think there's so much in that statement that needs to be like unpacked and made sense of, but it also like that in and of itself is like captivating and exciting. It's like, ooh, what does that mean?
It's deep.
Right? Yeah, it's so deep. So he kind of breaks it into two different parts. And the first part is we have this image of ourself. And there's so much there. And so like, why do we think we are what we think we are? And that's, you kind of hinted at it in the opening there, where we're almost like we're told how to be. And we essentially accept what we're told and agree to it. And that's all based on the false notion that we are a person who is separate from the world. And we'll get back to that because that might not sound false to a lot of people. So we can kind of make sense of why that is. But I was like lean into the ways that we are given our ego. Because like a baby is born, and we've talked about this a lot, but when a baby comes into the world, they do not, at least from my understanding, I've never spoken with a newborn baby, but my understanding through people who study babies is that when they come into the world, they have no idea that they are separate from everything. They just kind of like literally like they're in the womb, physically connected to the mother. So they're like, I am the mother. I am this that I'm in. They're getting nutrients just straight through their skin, through in the placenta, and like the amniotic fluid. And then as they emerge into the world through like this gateway and they come out in this new dimension, and it's just like, oh, this is all me, essentially. So that like, so if you like lay a baby down on the floor, it believes that it is the floor. If you hold it, it believes it is you. Like the dog comes over and sniffs its face, and it's like, oh, like this is me sniffing my own face. Like it doesn't separate like me versus the world. When it needs something, it just like cries and its needs are met. So it's the connection between itself and everything is immediate. It's like you cry, you get attention. So why would you be different from that which is responding to your impulses?
Yeah.
But as we start to develop, like the first things that we're taught is that like, this is you, you are this, and the rest is everything else, and that we're separate, and that we need to almost like protect ourselves. And no, don't touch that.
Yeah. Don't put the dirt in your mouth.
Yeah.
Don't do this. Don't do that. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, but this is what we're talking about when the ego develops. It's like, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to put dirt in my mouth? Wait. No, not really.
It's not really good for you. It's like, it's actually like, yeah,
what dirt it is.
whole different conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the biggest issues is relating to like health and wellness is kids don't put enough dirt in their mouth.
Yes.
But we'll come back to that in another episode.
We're just giving the example of
yeah,
it, but
yes.
that's I mean, yeah, don't touch the stove, don't open a drawer, you're gonna hit your finger. Like,
yeah,
this is like what a 6-month-old does. It's like exploring, it's going nuts, it's trying to understand the environment that it's in, because it doesn't think it's separate.
That's why like it immediately picks things up and goes to put them in their mouth. It's like it just wants to experience things and know what they are, and then if they're told immediately that's not you.
Yeah.
So that's where the programming begins, that you are a person, that you're not your environment, you're a person, and you're separate from your environment. And then we kind of develop from there what that person is, and like what we are, who we are in the world.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kind of examples of like the way that our parents talk to us, grandparents talk to us, our teachers as we start to get older and go to school,
siblings, friends, neighbors, if you're part of a religious community or just your neighbor, like every single person
at
a young age is an influence as to how
to be in the world.
Exactly.
And it's all like well-intentioned. Yeah. It's not like none of this is like, we're not necessarily being programmed on purpose in this way, but we are being programmed in a way where like your parents will say to you, like, that's not something you would do.
Alan Watts has a great story that he tells about when he was younger, as a young boy. He had a neighbor, and his friend, I think his name was like Peter or something, and he really admired Peter. He didn't say why he admired him, but he admired Peter and wanted to imitate him, be like him. So he played with him one day, and then Alan Watts went back to his house, and he was imitating and being just like Peter and doing these things. And his mother, he didn't use reprimanded him, but said like, that's not you. That's not you. Mm-hmm. That's Peter.
Yeah.
Don't do that or something.
Yes,
and so that's the example. Like
that's a great example.
It's not like we're not labeling it good or bad. That's just like his mother had an idea of what she wanted her son to be, Alan Watts to be, not like this other kid.
Yeah.
And he was like, what? Okay, I guess like the way to get my mother's love is to not act like Peter.
Yeah.
And so then you dissolve like actually what you truly wanted to do.
Yeah, you don't really have the opportunity to try out different things because you're already told which ones you are. Two things that jump out there is like, I forgot that story. That's so good. The idea of like imitation is a way that we learn as we're developing, is like copying other people. So that is actually like another way that we start to develop our persona is that we see somebody doing something that we like and we imitate it, or we see someone doing something that is acceptable in the society, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to be just like my older brother, and I'm going to do everything he does because I like the way that my parents treat him.
Excuse me.
in in my own experience, I've talked about this on the podcast. I did a lot of the opposite. My older brother used to test a lot of boundaries, get in trouble a lot, try to get under people's skin, and I would watch him get in trouble. So I learned really quickly, like, that's not how I want to act because I don't want to be punished like that.
Yeah, that's it. I'm so glad you brought that up because it doesn't necessarily need to be verbally spoken
Yeah.
to.
It's like you see it and you absorb that, especially in the first 7 years of your life. You just like soak everything up and absorb it and become it. And then when my parents would also kind of let me, like, they'd be like, we like that you don't do that. It was like, you're a good boy kind of thing. And which is also just trying to get a certain behavior out of someone and make their life easier. So I wouldn't test boundaries in the same way. But for a long time, my identity started to become like, I'm the boy who follows instructions and does what he's told and doesn't get in trouble. And then I felt the need to live up to that because that was the role I was playing.
Yeah.
Which sounds like it's a good thing until you get to the point where, like, you're afraid to take risks, you're afraid to do things that you actually want to do or that might be beneficial to you because you're afraid of how it's going to be perceived from the outside. And are people going to think this is the type of thing that I do? Which starts to be really, really limiting.
I was just going to say, it fucks with your head real fast.
That's another way of saying it starts to become limiting. But yeah, it really does. It fucks with your head. And we like enslave ourselves in like this mental prison. So we have this like image of ourselves, whether it was given to us, whether we kind of just developed it for certain survival reasons.
Yeah, because when you're younger, exactly like you were saying, you don't know you're separate until you begin hearing to do this, to do that, act, and it's like, wait a minute, I got to find my tribe. Those are our tribal instincts, and to survive within a tribe is to be accepted. So you're going to conform to what everybody is shaping you to be, so that you're not extricated and like shoved out and go fend for yourself. It's like, okay, this is acceptable. I'm good with this group. I'm good with this family. I can do this with these people. It's like, it's manipulated, really.
I actually I'm going to take a quick jump into the way David Hawkins describes the ego, because it is very much in alignment with that, where he says the ego is the persistence of the animal instincts, but now elaborated through the mind, the intellect, and given authenticity by the mutual agreements of society. So a lot, also really, I love that one, and it is very much because I think I really like the way he emphasized it's like it's the personification of our animal instincts, and which is survival. So it's like, so we start the ego, at least like as it's developing, is very much in sort of like this primal survival based mode, I guess we'll say. And a lot of that survival, like, we don't think about it in the moment, but as we're a child, it's just looking around and seeing like, what are people doing? What's acceptable? How do I need to act to get love and validation and appreciation and safety? What do I need to do in order to stay in the family and keep getting fed and keep having a place to sleep? And you kind of develop a persona of like role that you're going to play, who's going to be taken care of, because you started to believe that you're separate and need to earn your keep and earn your place. It becomes, as you really start to like pick it apart, it becomes really, really powerful. It's like this really powerful part of our development. And this is why I think it's important, is because it's like survival based. It's so predominant in our psyche, I think might be the right way to say that. And if we don't eventually recognize that that's not who we are, we get stuck in it, like I said before, and then we're always in that like animal survival mode, and we miss out on sort of the big picture. There's also an interesting part of this like self-image that we have, because it really ends up being, Alan Watts describes it as like this caricature of ourself. because it's not the whole picture. Nobody has the whole picture of who they are.
Yeah.
So we start to identify ourselves as our body. Or specifically like this is my body and I'm the me that's inside of it driving this body and I'm in control, which is another like part of the ego, is the belief that it's in control of the being. But when we think of who we are, we think of, okay, so I'm me, I'm inside this body, I have this body, I'm in the world, and everything like outside of these lines is not me. So we develop this idea of like me and not me. But then even when we look at the part of me that's me, there's parts I don't know about or I'm not aware of. You never really think of your like blood circulating as who I am, or like my lymph circulating, my like respiratory system, my digestive system, immune system, like all these things that are going on within our body. And there's like billions of reactions and interactions playing out every second within your body, trillions of cells. And each one of those things is just as much my body as the rest of it. But I'm not aware of it. So that's what I mean, like this idea of like the person is an incomplete idea. Like what ends up becoming like our ego and our idea of ourself is incomplete because it's not taking into consideration. Like I said, like my heart beating. I don't take my heartbeat into consideration when I describe myself, but it's happening. And if it wasn't happening, I'd be dead. So it's like very, very important. Yet like that's not me. It's also really interesting that like I refer to like me, but I don't refer to my hand as me. I refer to it as my hand, my foot, my leg, my body. But it's like, but there's a me also. And there's even, this is an interesting like thought I had, like going over this part of like my hand, my leg, like we'll protect ourselves with our arms or with our legs. Like it's almost like okay if I get hit in the leg, as long as it's not like my face or my head, because like this part is almost like more me than that is, and I could live without that. And I don't even really understand how or like what that idea is, but it's like that's my leg is me, and I know that if I cut off my leg I could survive, and I cut off my head I couldn't survive, and that's a part of it. But there's also, on top of that, there's a part of me right now that's thinking that my head and my brain is more me than my leg is.
It's so interesting.
It is. It's really, really interesting.
I've never thought of it. I've got to sit with it.
Yeah, and I don't even know fully what that means, but it just kind of points to the incompleteness of the self-image, I think. And there's parts of me that are more me than other parts of me. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of fascinating.
It is,
to say the least. There's also like you can't see behind your eyes.
I know. How crazy is that?
And so even like we think that we can see ourselves, but there's a part of ourselves that we can't see, and it's right there behind our eyes. And if you turn around, it's not there. And if it's just,
we also can't see internally.
Yeah,
unless it's through X-rays. But that's
not really. Yeah,
Parenting can be stressful and even overwhelming, especially if you have an overly sensitive child. What if there was a way to better understand, guide, and nurture your child's unique sensitivity and emotional intelligence to set them up for success on their developmental journey? Rooted Rhythm's signature course, Tuned In, offers a transformational process for parents of highly sensitive, super feeling, wise, and empathetic children. You know, Dan and I don't have children of our own, but we were both highly sensitive children growing up. and we know firsthand how difficult it can be to feel and process emotions in a productive and constructive way at such a young age. Recently, having gone through the Tuned In course, we both took away so much valuable information and practical tools we could utilize to reparent ourselves and to understand how to better use our sensitive nature to deepen our connection to ourselves as well as the world around us. The Tuned In course teaches parents concrete skills to meet their sensitive kids' needs in moments of intensity, increases their ability to connect deeply with their children, and supports a process of inner healing to shift how they relate to parenting. Each module offers unique grounding and embodiment meditations, lectures full of both evidence-based and practical content, and supplementary exercises to support in the implementation of new skills. Parents who have taken this course report walking away from the experience feeling relaxed in their being and confident to parent their children in a way that both feels most true to them as a parent, as well as most supportive for their children. If this resonates with you as a parent or simply for yourself, we are excited to offer our listeners $100 off of this transformational course. Click the link in our show notes, which goes directly to the Rooted Rhythm Tuned In course website, and enter the discount code DEEP Life, all one word, to receive $100 off of the Tuned In course.
So there's a part of the way that we interact with our environment that we're missing, because we can't hear our ears and we can't see our eyes and we can't bite our teeth. Which Alan Watts is also, I'm also like thinking of things that Alan Watts says about the ego and about the body and about how we exist in our environment, that are all really, really interesting when it comes down to questioning, like, who am I? Which is a really, really important question.
Yes.
Let's see, I feel like I'm missing so I talked before, like the false idea that we're a person who is separate from our environment.
Yes.
And that's really what I'm getting at. Because we have this partial image of who we are. And then we also have this belief that who we are is separate from what's around us.
Yeah.
But we're really not. The more you think about it, the more connected we are to our body.
Yes.
The more we are connected to our environment.
And our body.
And our body, yeah. Or our body is connected to our environment.
Yeah, that's right.
In the same way that bees and flowers we consider them separate. They're two different things, but you can't have bees without flowers and you can't have flowers without bees. The bees, like they're literally essential to the survival of one another. So at some point, somebody went around and was like labeling things and describing things and saw a bee flying in the air and was like, okay, well, that's one thing. Saw something that looks completely different. It's like, oh, it's a flower. It doesn't move. It's right here. It's different colors, completely different thing. Without thinking, okay, how does a flower turn into another flower? How does it spread its seed with bees? And bees need flowers and flowers need bees. It's essentially, it's like the same way like a person needs their lung, but we don't think of ourselves as lungs. We just, because it's all wrapped into this one like tight little package, we assume they're the same. But also like we get oxygen from plants and from trees. In the same way the bee is pollinating the flower, we're breathing oxygen from trees, and then we're exhaling carbon dioxide that gets cycled and used. And there's this whole process where if there were no more trees, there'd be no more people. But we believe that we're separate from the trees, and we believe we're separate from our environment. But like the environment is where our food comes from. Would be dead without food. We need food. We need water. We need oxygen, and those things all come from our environment. So just like we need our heart and we need our lungs, we also need sunlight and we need plants and we need animals.
We are nature.
So yeah, exactly. We are nature. So that's like the idea that we are a separate person from everything else is just a social construct.
Mm.
And it's like in the same way that we use time. Time is a social construct. It's not a real thing. We just chose that we're going to break the day into 24 hours, and it's useful. It's a useful thing. Just it's very similar to like borders on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Or borders on a map. They're not on the ground.
Yeah.
But you look at a map and it's like, okay, this is the United States. This is Mexico. There's a line and they're separate from one another. But if you were there, in some parts there's a wall. In other parts there's nothing. But if you go to like, there's a lot of areas where you have no idea.
Yeah.
Where if you take one step, you're in Mexico, and you step back, you're in Arizona or whatever, wherever you are, and you can go back and you can have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me in Awareness, Anthony DeMello talks about that. And he's like, I forget what it was, a story of like an Indian who was like a prisoner of like the Pakistanis, and one day they come to him like, all right, we're going to bring you back to India. So they like go out they like leave the city and they drive out like past into the outskirts and out into the frontier, and they're headed toward the border, and they get there and they're like, all right, we were in India. We stopped. They let them out and they're like, you're home. You're free. Oh, like, this is amazing. This is the greatest thing. Thank you. Thank you. And he drops to the ground, starts kissing the guy's beautiful Indian ground. And you all look at these beautiful Indian trees. And then one guy's like looking at his map. He was like, you know what, sir, I'm so sorry. We made a mistake. We're still 10 miles away from India. And the guy like it's ridiculous. You think that there's like an Indian tree and a Pakistani tree, but they're trees. They're just trees. We like this separation is just a social construct that we decided, okay, here's a line, and this side of the line is one way, and this side of the line is the other way. Or we look at your watch and be like, all right, it is noon.
It's not noon everywhere.
Yeah. And it's like not even
real.
Not even real.
Time, yeah.
But it's useful so we can meet people at the same time, and we know streets have names and cities have borders, so we know to meet someone at the same right time at the right place. But it's also kind of important to recognize that it's not everything, that the map is not the territory, that things aren't as they seem, and sometimes it's just this thing that we've all agreed to, that we've kind of trapped ourselves in at the same time just because we agreed to it.
Yes, I think that you explained that really well. If you want to just say, like, it's a really good movie set we developed.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
It's going to sound crazy to some people, but it makes sense when you understand who you truly are and how you're filtering life through your ego.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, like you said, it's really cool. Like, let's take advantage of this movie. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Like, there are some really cool aspects, and then there are some really shitty aspects, because the ego like likes to think it's separate than everything. Mm-hmm. So we're fighting. We're constantly at war with each other. We have poverty. Well, wait a minute. Like that's not true. Like, it's not a conversation I want to get into, but like the movie itself, like the set that we've created, can be so beneficial for everybody when we get out of this societal norm of keeping everybody in fear and separation. That's not working any longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not working any longer to conform to what people, and I don't even know who these people are, that tell us what's correct, what to do, what not to do. You're black, you're white, you're orange, you're green, you're man. What? Like, why do we have to be so separate? We are all one. Like, let's embrace the uniqueness. Let's all work together. Let's have a collaborative world. This whole hell that we're in is like literally not working anymore.
It's so crazy. It's like the world is absolutely insane, but we have this like societally agreed to perception of reality.
Yeah,
where we're like, there are certain ways that it is socially acceptable to experience the world. And I bring that up because you're pointing out how crazy what we like what's actually what it is we've all agreed to. That we have these wars, we have this like idea of scarcity, and we have this need to like defend ourselves from one another and protect ourselves, which is all based on this false premise that we are separate and that we're all kind of just stuck in our ego thinking that we need to defend ourselves so we can survive and stay alive. And it's these like basic animal instincts that have been projected into the world. And then we kind of create a society based on these ideas. And when you start to question it, and you start to like, wait, I think that there's more to reality than what we're experiencing and what we've been taught, people make you feel crazy really fast. And I want to share that because
we've experienced it.
and really like until very recently, and we've talked about this a little bit. I've had a lot of moments where I needed to stop myself. Like, am I going insane? Am I losing my mind? Like, am I really finding like a deeper meaning in the world, or am I just like spiraling into like schizophrenia and psychosis? And part of it is just because it's really challenging to start questioning all your beliefs and how you identify yourself and everything that you've known, and being like, 38 years old and be like, wait a minute, for the last 38 years, I've been like living in a fantasy. And now I'm waking up to the fact that like the world is significantly different than I believed it was. And I am not who I thought I was.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting because it's like I'm coming out of being psychotic. And I'm finally like not. But it's like the Twilight Zone. You look around and everybody's in this like daze of a social construct that everybody just kind of agreed to be crazy.
It's the Matrix.
Yeah, we're literally in the Matrix. Yes,
that movie is real.
Yeah.
Wait, what were we watching? Oh, we were watching a Michael Tollinger show. That was
okay. Yeah.
We there are so many documentaries that allude to the Matrix and how like this is literally what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want people to know that it's okay if you start to feel a little crazy. You're probably not.
Dig deeper.
Keep
it
digging.
Gets so much
Keep
better.
digging because I've come out on the other side of being afraid I was losing my mind, and now I'm just really comfortable with knowing that I'm not the crazy one, and then just not taking myself seriously so I don't get too worked up about it.
Absolutely. You also have a lot of you hear so many stories. I can name dozens of them from people who have told me this, and then hearing other people talk about, oh my gosh, this person talks about how XYZ, they're losing their minds.
Yeah.
Or we'll be talking to someone and they're like, yes, I've been sharing my journey with my family, and they think I'm crazy. They think I'm on drugs. And it like breaks my heart because that's literally my biggest fear. It's like I've held in so much of my newfound awareness and perception of life because it is deemed unacceptable to think anything different than what's been told.
Yeah.
We should, quote unquote, should believe. And it can be depressing because you feel like, oh my God, am I wrong?
Right.
What is right and wrong anyways? Again, that's not even real. It's just.
Yep. Yeah. And it's like I said, like don't take it too seriously. Just like almost like you can have some fun with it because we're just playing a game. Like you said, like it's a movie set. It's a play, like the Shakespeare quote, like it's all the world is a stage and we're all like merely players. Like that's what it is. Like we're all just kind of coming in, playing a role and leaving. And that's literally the etymology of the word person. Like I said before, we have this false idea that we are a person.
Yeah.
But the word person comes from the word persona, which like the Latin etymology of the word persona is like per sonum. It's the place where the sound comes from, which is a reference to like in ancient Greece, in the amphitheaters, and probably all over the world in the amphitheaters, but they would they wore masks that had like a big mouth opening that like kind of like funneled out like a megaphone, so that they were able to like project their voices really, really loud when they were on stage playing a role and being a character. They could portray their role to the world because their mask would amplify the sound. So the mask was considered the persona. And then over time, we have adopted persona as person, as who we are. But like our person isn't us. It's just the role we're playing in the play. And I think that's awesome. Like I think it's like that's so telling because like our ego is our persona. It is the character that we're using to filter the world and filter the experience so that we're able to learn. And I'll keep saying it, like the problem with the ego comes when we get trapped in the ego and we believe that we're actually the character that we're playing, rather than being the observer of the play that's able to learn from the scenes that we're in.
Absolutely. It's kind of the same thing that Joe Dispenza says. Our personality creates our personal reality.
Yes.
I wanted to say it slowly because it is kind of like our personality creates our personal reality.
Yeah.
Our personality creates our personal reality. So the way that we've been and adapted to show up in the world, it's reflecting back to us what we're putting out.
Yeah.
So he says all the time, like to change that, you have to change internally, which we always constantly talk about. So it's like all of these things are. So I kind of just wanted to bring it down to basics. Again, basics doesn't do it justice because it's so complex, and we will keep talking about it. But at least this is a more of like an umbrella kind of.
Yeah, I would say it's like it's foundational more so than it's basic, because basic implies simplicity. And even though it is
really basic,
right? But even though this is like the simplest thing, we like. It's the simplest thing in the terms that like we started playing a character and then we forgot we were an actor and we got stuck in our character. That's the basic. But the complexity of it is like all these other little nuances that make it really, really hard to separate ourselves from the role that we're playing and realize that we are so much more than just this ego, just this personification of our animal instincts and this character that we get to be in the world. So I want to talk to the feudal efforts.
Oh, okay.
So the second half of the Alan Watts description of the ego, I'll say it again. He says the ego is an illusion married to a futility. So the illusion is that we are actually a separate person who is separate from their environment, when in truth we are not separate from anything. And he actually says the real you is the totality of everything that you are aware of and a great deal more. And as I kind of talked about before, like the flowers and the bees, like we cannot separate ourselves from our environment. I think it's like I have this image in my head as I said that of like a goldfish in a little Ziploc bag. And it's like, that's like almost like what we try to do to ourselves is like take ourselves out of the ocean and just be like in our own Ziploc bag. But you still like, if you were to take the fish out of the water, the fish cannot exist. So a fish needs to be in water, just like we need to be out of water and in the air, in the oxygen, in the environment, or we don't exist. So it's a part of who we are. We're also all interconnected, and we're all the same. We are all, it's just one consciousness. And that we'll get to that more in other episodes because it's just too much to talk about now. But I like to, even thinking of ourselves as individual people, we still can't be separated from the rest of our environment. Like we're everything that we're aware of, plus more than that. Like I was saying before, we're not aware of our heartbeat or like the blood flowing through our body or the lymph or our digestion until something goes wrong, which is really interesting. Like nobody is ever aware of their eyes until like they got something in their eye or their vision's a little bit blurry. Or they're not aware of their ears. You just hear until you have problems hearing. Or you hear like a ringing in your ears, and it's like, oh, what's going on with the ear? It's the first time you think about your ear all day. A toothache is a really good example. No one really thinks about their teeth outside of like when they're brushing their teeth, like unless you have a toothache, and then all you can think about is your tooth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of everything throughout our body. Like we're having trouble breathing, we're very aware of our lungs. If we're having heart issues, you're gonna be very aware of your heart. Gut issues, you really quickly start to pay attention to your digestion and your organs, your intestines, but you don't. If there's not a problem, you don't notice it. So like Alan Watts kind of mentions this and then points out that the mere fact that we are aware of ourself means that something's wrong. And I think the thing that's wrong is that we believe we're separate from our environment. So we're like cutting ourselves off from the majority of who we are. And then we feel like incomplete and we feel like something's wrong. We feel anxious and uncomfortable. And we feel like I need to figure out who I am because we're blocking ourselves off from it.
Yes. Yes.
And then a part of that being of a person is, I guess we'll go back. We were talking before about how we get like how teachers or parents will kind of like tell us who we are. They also in a lot of ways tell us how to be and how to act and to like do things. So if I were to like, tell you, and this is another one, this is one of my favorite Alan Watts bits, you could call it, but it's like if you're like in class and you're like kids are all sitting in a classroom and a teacher's teaching and it's something really boring and they're not paying attention, the teacher will like, pay closer attention. And the kids will all have to like look and squint and stare and like, and like how do you pay closer attention to something? you can't, like we squeeze and we tense up. Or it's like look closely at this and you like squint your eyes, even though squinting your eyes like makes your vision blurrier. Like you don't actually see better, but it gives the illusion of looking. Or like you like listen to me, and it's like okay, and you like turn your ear toward them or like squeeze your ear. It's like hold yourself together and you're like tense up. And there's like all these things that we do to give the illusion that we're the ones that are in control of our body. But in actuality, we don't know how to look. I don't know how to see. I can do it. I open my eyes and it happens naturally, but I don't know how to see or not see. I don't know how to hear something. I just let it happen. I don't know how to like touch my nose. I don't know how to lift my arm and touch my finger to my nose. I know how to want to do it. And I know that usually when I want to do it, it happens. But if I was like, okay, touch my nose, and then my arm didn't move, I wouldn't know what to do about it because I don't have any control over that.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really, really fascinating about like, we believe that we're doing things in the world, but we're really just kind of just observing and describing the things that are being done in our name. Or like my body does things just like my heart pumps. My hand moves. It's no different. The difference is that I can like have an intention or like a will to do a thing.
Right.
Like to get up and walk across the room. Like I can't necessarily do that. I can just set the intention. I can like intend and will it. And then my body will follow through because my body knows how to do it. And if we're kind of in alignment, my body will do the things that I want it to do. But also like sometimes like we have arm spasms and like so every time my arm moves isn't because I told it to. Sometimes like you'll be laying in bed, like half asleep, and like you just kind of scratch your face, and you never thought to yourself like, oh, I have an itch, I need to scratch it. You just kind of do it, or you'll adjust things and move things. Like we do that. We go through our day and we do things. Who's doing them? Like I don't like. So like, am I the ego that's in control and like manipulating my body, or am I just an observer of my body who is really, really quick to take credit for things?
It's a deep question.
It is. It's a very deep question, but like, so we have like that's the second part of the illusion. Like we have this illusion that's married to a futility. All these like futile things that we're doing to convince ourselves that we are actually a person. And it's like we're holding ourselves together and we're tense and we're doing. It's like it's all like meaningless stuff to make it appear that we're a person, so that we can justify our self-concept of ourself or our self-image. Like, oh yeah, I'm a person for sure, doing person stuff all the time.
Yeah, I'm working, I'm doing this, I'm conversating. Yeah, all of these things that make up how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is kind of funny when you think about it like
yeah,
that.
it's hilarious.
But it's also, it can be really confusing. And you talk about this a lot and have talked about it. And I didn't get it for a long time. I did, because it's confusing for, like, what do you mean you don't know how to move your arm? You just lift it up.
Yeah.
But how do you know to lift it up?
Right.
Like, I really don't know. I don't know what mechanisms are going on internally, like from my head to my shoulder to my bones to my, like, I really don't know. Actually, I don't know how to move my arm.
And if you go look at like an anatomy textbook, it'll tell you what all the parts are. You look at a like kinesiology textbook, and it's going to tell you like which parts are doing what. But I don't know how to like contract my bicep and have my bicep work in conjunction with my elbow joint and bring the like. I don't know. And I literally can't do it. And also I could sit here and be like, move my arm, move my arm.
Yeah.
Move my arm, move my arm. And it's not like genuine. So it's not the command. There's something else there. There's something happening when movement takes place that isn't mental. And it's like, it's just like, I wish I had an answer. I wish I could say exactly what it is, but it's also so fun not to know. But yeah.
I was just saying, it's so fun not to know, but that's what we're discovering.
Yeah.
That's what we're uncovering. That's what we're digging deeper for.
Yeah. And there's like, when you carry that further into the world, like we think about like our life and the things that we do, and like we go and do our job and we go places and we drive. It's like all these things, like we have this like sort of like mental description of the things we do, but we don't really, we're not really the ones doing them. Or at least the one doing it isn't the same one that's observing it and the same one that thinks is doing it.
Yeah.
And there's something like so mind-blowing in that.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the ego. My perception of it is a part. So like I said before, like the ego is like, it's our character. And I think that, like I said it before, the ego is just really, really quick to take credit for things. So we start to do something, and before we can be like surprised by it happening, we've already taken credit for the doing of it.
Yeah. We've attached a story to it through the ego filter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I think you've done a very good job explaining it.
I hope I didn't make it like more confusing. I think there's a lot of really good resources out there. And like I said, and like people like Alan Watts and David Hawkins, that if people want to explore these much deeper, we will also continue to explore these much deeper.
Yeah.
So stick around and listen to the Deep Life, and we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, because I think kind of what I had mentioned at the very beginning, if you're unaware of the ego and how it operates and how it keeps us in separation, and again, There's nothing wrong with it. It is how we show up in the world. But when you wake up one day and say, shit, how did I end up like this? How the fuck did I get my life like this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, right, like the midlife crisis is like not a joke. Like that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And I feel like I went through it, but at like 30 instead of whatever. Age is just a number, right? It doesn't matter. It's gotten me to this point. But it almost like snapped me out of reality to go down a different path of rediscovering and discovering who I truly am. And I think the problem is if we don't uncover this or become aware, you just stay stuck in the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And then even like this also happened, like, okay, I'm not my ego. I'm just going to play the victim. And for years, I was stuck in the victim mentality because it's like, all right, if my ego was adapted from watching and learning and hearing everybody tell me what to do, who to be, how to act, how to dress, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Well, F everybody else. They made me this way.
Right.
Their fault, not mine. And I loved it. That's what I stayed in for years. And when I say years, it was really like 2-3 year span. It wasn't that long, but that gets old too.
Mm-hmm.
And
but that's like, just like the ego.
Yes, it's like the ego is desperate attempt to stay small and safe, limited and separate.
Because it is like, is that survival aspect of the ego.
Yeah.
Is like, as long as you believe you're separate and everybody's against you, the ego is like strong and in control.
Yeah. I feel like just up until like recently have I really began understanding like the workings of my ego and how it's developed. And I'm not upset. I'm like, yes, give me more, show me more, tell me more. Because when I drop the blame and drop the victimhood, I'm understanding, I'm not actually mad at the world. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at my friends. I'm not mad at my teachers. I'm not mad at my family. I'm not mad at, society. I'm not mad at television. I'm mad at myself. Because I adapted all of these different personalities to gain acceptance and love when I actually wanted to do something completely different. And now I got to figure out what I want and how I want to show up in the world without this ego filter that has lived within me my whole life. I think that that's really empowering. I think it's empowering for everybody to take their power back, not listen to what they feel in their hearts isn't true or right for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, what you had mentioned about when we begin talking about this, society is like, what, wait a minute, what do you mean? Because it also challenges their view on everything that we've been told is correct.
Yeah.
Well, what is correct? Really? Like, look at the world right now. This is acceptable, and how like we all want to live in this hell where everybody is like, there's like 1% that's like rich and abundant, and like there's famine, there's wars, there's strife. Like we have borders, we're building walls. Like it breaks my heart. It's like, but that's okay, and we're all just like, yep. I do believe people are beginning to wake up to this.
For sure. And that's why I think it almost like it seems like it's really bad because a lot of things are like coming to the surface and a lot of things are being talked about that weren't talked about before and seen that weren't seen before. But it's reinforcing the understanding that something's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like all these things come to the surface for us to see them and deal with them and realize this. There's a better way.
Yes. And I think one of the biggest things that has really helped me in this is just I'm working on this. It's challenging, but I'm working on it. Like in any given moment, we have the opportunity to choose who we want to be. And I kind of didn't realize this for my whole life because I've been told what to do. I've imitated what to do that was socially acceptable. And this happens at such a young age when our ego develops. We're really unaware. We're choosing because we're trying to get love and acceptance. Like we're talking about those tribal survival instincts to be a part of a pact and be accepted and contained within that. So we're safe. But it's like, we're not children anymore. We have free choice. We have the opportunity at any given moment to choose differently if you want to be different.
Yeah.
And it takes practice. And that's why I'm saying it's something I'm working on. I'm dissolving what I thought I needed to be to get accepted and really developing who I truly am, uncovering what I actually want. And do I do it perfectly every single day? No. But we have hundreds of thousands of choices within just one day.
Right.
All you have to do is choose differently once. Then again, then the next day, then it begins, like you build the momentum. It's like, okay, I'm choosing differently. I don't really like the way that I'm going down here. I'm going to choose differently. Like it's kind of like this isn't linear. It's like that spiral staircase that we talk about.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting. It's like, all right, this worked for this amount of time, but I'm going to try something different. And it's like, that's the power of choice.
And then you become better at choosing, and you become better at recognizing that you have a choice. It's like the more you practice that, the more you see it.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, and it helps you discover who you are, meaning dropping that egoic nature of, oh, okay, I understand now that I was doing this because I was either told that, a memory pops back in my head. It's like, all right, I get it now. I'm like, okay, I've been this way simply because this situation happened and I conformed to it. And then I chose to go this way, but it's like, I'm going to go left instead of right here, as Logan Gilbert beautifully said. And that just came to me, and it's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense. It's like just going in a different direction. And it takes courage, it takes patience, it takes grace, especially depending on how old you are. I mean, think about the decades long we've been on this, or never mind people who are older. It's just like, it's uncovering who we truly are, rediscovering the aspect of ourselves that we put behind us.
Yeah.
And allowed the ego to kind of take the driver's seat instead of the passenger seat.
That's why this conversation, I think, is so important. And it's like just bringing awareness to the idea that we might not be who we think we are. And the more that we're able to like question that identity and that belief and start to maybe uncover that, like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I am just like mimicking my father right now, or I am just playing out what somebody told me, or I am just focused on my own survival and not looking at maybe the bigger picture and seeing how these things are all interrelated, and how if I am my environment, then if I'm doing things that damage my environment, I'm damaging myself, because we have this idea that we need to go out and like conquer the world and keep ourselves safe by destroying our environment. And it's like, that's clearly not working, because you can't keep poisoning the oceans and poisoning the soil and poisoning the air and then expect to have good air to breathe and clean food to eat. So we're destroying ourselves by thinking that we're separate, and that the actions we're taking to defend ourselves are in essence destroying ourselves, because we're only looking at a small part of the whole picture. And along those lines, you said earlier, like you quoted Joe Dispenza, that like our personality creates our personal reality. And if you don't like your personal reality, you can't change it by being the same personality. So if your personality is your ego, you can't solve problems that were created at the ego level from the ego level. And that's why we need to keep bringing more and more awareness to this, and realizing that we are so much more than our ego, that we're everything.
Everything is everything.